Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of Aaron Walker Art Talk. I am still Aaron Walker, and my guest is still Hannah Frankman.
Still, are you sick of me yet?
No, I'm not. I'm really not.
Somehow I'm still here. I guess we're having a good time.
And Hannah has chosen for the 15th episode fashion. Hannah, would you like to talk about why you chose that?
Yeah. So this one, I feel like I start all of these with how this one caught my eye. This one was when you sent me a link to your gallery. You're like, here are all of my paintings. Take a look at them. This was like the icon picture on the link. So I didn't even pay attention to it really on the page, but I kept seeing it. And I was like, because you can only see part of it. I was like, okay, what is this? And I looked and I was like, oh, this is really cool. There's something very beautiful about it. And yet it's also rugged, and it has this, there's a pattern throughout history, right, of artists being very driven by current events. And I like the way that you're tapping into that with this. And you have other paintings that tap into it too, but I just really liked this one. And I was very curious about this charged current events feel that you have going on with this one.
I mean, so I really appreciate all those comments. Especially the one about rugged beauty, right, is something that I'm very interested in. And so even if it's holding up a skull with your ratty dreads, or wearing 308, well, that's not probably 308 ammunition, wearing these bullets around your body like a fashion statement. These are things that I'm very interested in and something that I'm captivated by.
Yes. I like it. So was this, did you choose this because you found it to be an interesting image, or is there either a current events fascination or a type of message or a point that you're trying to make? What's going on here? Because this one feels like there could be a lot there.
Well, I'm pretty sure the image is from Syria. I can't remember where I got it from. It's certainly, I don't think it's a political statement, despite previous episodes. But so my thought behind it was, again, this guy wearing this ammunition as the way that you would wear a scarf on a runway, right? And even his hand placement is like this. It's very, showing off what he's wearing.
Very model-esque.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wait, what is that word?
Model-esque.
Model-esque, yes, indeed. And even with the scarf around his face. And I mean, I suppose it's potential that subconsciously, or there's a drive, or it can be interpreted as the fashion of radical politics, right? So it's very fashionable, of course, to be super edgy and oh, I'm this radical, or I'm this anarchist. This is actually something that we've touched on in previous episodes, about wearing these labels as a fashion accessory, right? But in this particular piece, it wasn't a conscious sort of effort.
Okay, so are you objectively fascinated by the picture itself and the humanity that's conveyed in it, the person itself? Or do you think that there is an element of you that's interested in it because it is a current event sort of portrayal? So
I will put it like this. I have, separate from the reference picture section of my hard drive, I have another set of pictures that's for a zine I want to make. And so I typically choose images that I think have symbolic weight or meaning, even if it's not coherent enough to put into words. So if it's a hawk standing above the corpse of a dove that it just took down, right? These are images that I think are very weighty. And this was actually on that part of the hard drive, not on the subject reference part. Am I concerned with the humanity of the individual? Not in so much in this piece, which you could actually tell because the eyes aren't filled in, right? The sort of standard that we put in previous episodes. But I don't know. And along with all the other pictures, I was kind of engrossed again by the texture of this ammunition and the scarf and all these different things sort of playing together.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that you had paid attention to the texture and the lighting on the ammunition. So I think part of what really attracted me to it. And I want to talk about that more in a minute. But first of all, I have one more question about the person in the picture. And this may not make as much sense as I'd hoped it would, or be as powerful of a question as I'd hoped, because, you've sort of touched on the objectivity of it already. But okay, this may be very politically charged. It doesn't have to be, though. It doesn't have to be at all. Is this person a hero or a villain?
I don't know. Under whose framework and what timeline? Right?
Your own. Because here is, I think that in art, only the artist's opinion actually matters. I think that everybody else thinks they have something to say, right? But they're like the busybody that wants all the gossip and then has an opinion. Right. The only that actually matters is the artist's opinion. That is my very chart. I don't actually know if I 100% believe that, but that is currently where I stand.
Go on Tumblr and just put the artist is not dead. I'm sorry, the author is alive, right? Something like that. And just watch the hate come towards you. Because that's
I don't do Tumblr, so
well we don't
I'm safe.
From Reddit.
I know what you mean.
Twitter.
But I don't do that either. I'm safe.
Send a carrier pigeon to the New York Times. Look, here's the thing. It's the death of the author is what I was referring, but we're not talking about that right now because we're trying to stay within 15 to 30 minutes, right? So is this person a hero to me? I mean, I don't look at the world in terms of heroes and villains, right? I look at the world in sort of Nietzschean terms of power. Right. And I would say that this is a powerful individual, whether that makes him an adequate enemy or a worthy ally is sort of beside the point to me.
Okay. This is interesting. Is this something that you would have actively thought about already in relation to the art, or are you only thinking about it because I brought up the question?
No, it's not something I've actively thought about before, but I would say that my Nietzschean worldview permeates through everything that I do. Yeah. So I wouldn't say that I paint or illustrate heroes or villains. Generally, I don't think I have. I'm having to look back. And when I do, it's very conscious, right? So I've painted one thing actually called Nietzschean iconography, right? Which is this image of Nietzsche as a saint, right? In a typical Christian icon style, right? So even if I were to do something like that where this person is good or evil, it's done knowingly in that context and somewhat sardonically at that.
Okay. So in our last episode, Aaron Walker, you left us a very nice little cliffhanger. Which I may or may not have given you a hard time about after we wrapped up the call. You want to elaborate on that and tell me what that was that you were like, oh, I have this great thing. Oh, wait, actually, I'm not going to tell you.
Well, it's something that we've touched on a few times in our episodes together, which is about color, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes color is something that's willfully done by the artist, and sometimes it's not. And so for the willful part, I wanted to bring up the example of Van Gogh, right? He has these letters where he writes about in intricate detail, the importance of all these different colors and forms in all of his works, right? And it's very precise and very thought out and somewhat tragic in a sense because Van Gogh ate yellow cadmium paint because he thought it would make him happy. I know, try not to.
Oh my goodness. What did it do?
What?
What did it do to him?
Probably led to his insanity. But here's the thing. So some artists really put weight into color and what it means for the image. But I think even if you don't, it's not something that you have to be conscious of, right? So if I'm painting this man who I believe is valiant, let's say, I don't have to be consciously thinking of every single stroke and what the color means for that overall purpose. This is something that's automatic. If I draw you a certain way, my thoughts going into that will sort of materialize from an unconscious place.
Okay.
That was the cliffhangers.
This is the good stuff. So that was like worth waiting for. That was very good. Like that's the stuff that makes art to me, because I'm a word person. So like talking about art is like when I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is really cool. So that's the kind of stuff that speaks to me, and is fascinating. So I want to know a little bit more about your technique in creating this painting. And I almost feel like we missed the bell curve that we talked about in the first episode we did together. Like, I feel like that was the peak of the bell curve. We should probably stop. But I have one more question for you. I'm gonna let it kind of taper a little bit, and then maybe we can have like another spike. Which is not to say this isn't going to be interesting. It's just less climactic. What is your technique for making, because this is an illustration, not a painting.
Yes.
Do tell what that means.
So, I mean, again, it's kind of like with everything else, you start with graphite, pencil. In a previous episode, I talked about some exceptions to that, but that's, as a rule, what I start with. Making note of the darkest places and moving up from there. This is actually an example of a piece where I didn't consciously, I didn't have like the final piece in mind, right? So before, in a previous episode, we talked about spontaneously creating a piece as you go. So this is an example of that, right? So I didn't know what colors the scarf was ultimately going to be, how the ammunition was going to turn out, all these sorts of things. It just kind of like materialized as it went along. In my illustrations, I use Pentel whiteout or
nothing. That's just like, I like it. Maybe that's not like unorthodox, and I think it kind of is, because I'm, like I said, I'm not like a visual artist, but I just like it.
It sounds cool, right? And I make like orange with mangoes, like, or whatever, right? Oranges, but yeah, I mean, a lot of artists use Pentel whiteout, especially in like the graffiti sort of scene when they're doing on paper. They'll use whiteout because it's a common material, right? It's easy to get your hands on. It's cheap. But
I didn't know.
I'll also use like an acrylic white pen, right? They make pens that have acrylic paint in them that's very thin, that like a piece of paper will accept. So I'll also use that, and I did on this piece as well. But we were talking before slightly about this. But I also really like the really cheap markers that you buy. Like you get like a pack of 100 for like $10-15. I really like using those because you can layer them, because they're so cheap. You can just layer them to get sort of the effect that you want.
That's the best. I love this. You're not like, okay, I have to get like the very fancy, expensive materials and, have the finest quality to make my artwork. You're like, I'll get like the cheap like coloring book markers, and I'll get like some whiteout, and I can make beautiful art that I can like sell. I think that's the best.
For sure. I mean, I will spend like $20 on a like a fancy black like brush pen or something. Like it's happened.
Which I don't fault you for. I just love the fact that you can go and take it, like in my logic anyway, it almost adds to the gritty feel that a lot of your art has. It's not pretentious. That's something that I feel in, like, I've been trying to put, like, all night, I've been trying to put my finger on, okay, what is it about your art? Like, how would I define your style? And I still haven't figured it out. There's something, you have, like, a color palette tendency that's, like, very muted, like, very, like, the kind of, like, colors you see when you go in, like, the men's department in the store, right? And not, like, the men's, like, exercise section where there's, like, the neon, like, the Carhartt section.
Yes. Yeah, I wear a lot of CARHART, so like that caught me off guard.
Which I may or may not know because I've shopped in the men's Carhartt section before. May or may not. I'm not confirming or denying that. Somehow I know this fact of like the distinct color palette there. But no, and I think that's actually like a good metaphor for it, because it also has that kind of like down to earth feel that goes along with those colors and like, people who wear Carhartt. And yet it's also it has this like artistic spin. It's like got ideas and this almost, I don't want to say angsty because I'm afraid that could come across as an insult and that's not what I mean. But this like, you know, a slightly unsettled place where you're like, well, if we combine this thing and it makes you feel a little unsettled, but there's also like something to be said there. And like, it's worth exploring. There's a lot. I'm missing pieces. There are other pieces to define your style, and I could be totally off too. This is coming from like a preliminary look through.
You've done much better at describing my art than I ever have. So
you're like, it's Carhartt meets like Nietzsche.
Yeah, Carhartt Nietzsche. There you go.
There you go. That should be the tagline on your website, man.
That should be the tag on my website, Carhartt Nietzsche. I really like all your other words. It's like rugged beauty with muted pastel tones, down to earth, but not pretentious. Like,
yeah, but you can say that so much shorter. You only need 2 words, Carhartt.
And Nietzsche. That sounds like the name of it.
I could keep you here all night asking you questions about your art. Like, this has been fun, but you also told me when you started, you were like, you know, if the episode's only 3 minutes, that would probably be okay. And I'm like, I think it'll be slightly longer than that. And I'm like, we've talked each other's ears off. Like, I think.
You think this is a good endpoint, is what you're saying?
I think we got like a little spike on the bell curve anyway, so I think we're good.
Mm-hmm. All right,
probably shouldn't blow it while we've got it.
I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Hey, this has been great. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been really, really fun.
We might have to do it again sometime. Thank you so much.
Might have to.
I'll see you next time, okay?
Take care, Aaron.
All right.